Let's change gears for a minute. Obviously, coldest day of 2016 with us today. We were reading about and hearing about Louisville, north, even in E-Town, a little bit of bad roads. Let's talk about your protocol when the snow hits. Who makes decisions? Do we decide to salt? Who's coming out? What time? Go through some of that protocol.
Really, it's a tried and tested by mistake formula. Is that as soon as we hear a forecast of bad weather, we look at several news services and we get a feel for what the impact is and going to be. We have our salt supplies. We've got those, and we're ready for that.
So trucks are loaded, blades are on, and ready to go when you hear
They're probably not loaded because we keep all the salt under.
Okay.
But the trucks are ready to go. It's fairly easy to put the blades on, so we leave those off so that we don't add extra fuel costs to the trucks when they're running. But as soon as that happens, we spend a day and get everything ready because we usually have that much notice. And our full workforce of 10 or 12 people are on call and prepared to work, 24/7. And the decisions that are made is John Thomas here at City Hall works with Terry, works with me, and then we decide what needs to be done. Now, as far as what streets are done, we leave that up to Terry. Terry Bland is our Public Works Director, and he has worked with Bobby Thompson and Johnny Yoakum. And so Terry, and then last year, did a tremendous amount of work as far as leading the charge against the snow. And as we've talked about before, I never will forget how much snow we had. And by Wednesday of that week, we were driving down Main Street.
Let's talk a minute about residential areas, because I'm sure the common complaint is, well, they've got all these streets done, but they never did my street.
Yeah.
So is there a process, or do they try to at least get the bulk of the snow off of most residential streets inside the city limits?
We have a priority is that all the main thoroughfares are done first.
All right, let's start back up for a second. What does the city have responsibility for, and what does the state have responsibility for?
The state has responsibility for all state-owned highways. They, in conjunction with the Federal Highway Department, are responsible jointly for all the federal property. And
so Main Street?
Main Street is a state highway, so that's theirs. We will come down it and throw salt on it, and when we got a blade and we're going back to the barn, we will run down through there. All the city streets are prioritized with regard to the police department being able to get out, the hospital being able to do business, and when needed, the school system. Now, the school system is in the county, and because they call school off, that is not our first priority. But if they need a little snow knocked off, we'll run out there and do it. So anything that depends on the safety of the community is done first. Hospitals, not Walmart,
not Kroger,
but anything that requires safety vehicles to get around town. Then from there we start just branching out. Golfview Terrace and Indian Creek, they're usually one of the last ones with regard to a priority. And in some sense, Golfview Terrace is delayed a little bit because I live out there, and I make sure that I don't get criticized for getting our street done first. Now, getting the first layer of snow off.
And Councilman Grundy is right out there with you, right?
Now, Councilman Grundy may have some influence.
Right.
I don't know. On a serious note, after all of those, it's a matter of convenience. If we're doing, industrial traffic is important. So all the roadways to the factories, we try, because those big trucks are coming regardless. They are on the road. And we don't want them getting stuck here in town anywhere. So safety, industry, and then we always, out at Rolling Hills, there's a lot of people out there. So we try to hit those streets. And unfortunately, by the time we're doing all, there's always a street or two that we forget. And if somebody will call City Hall, we'll put that on our list. The other bad thing that happens is, last year was particularly bad, when we send a snow plow down a street that's got 14 inches of snow on it, you're going to get a driveway blocked. And we depend on everybody to shovel their driveways out to get out until we can come by, and we don't mind doing that, but that's not a priority. And I hate that, but we don't have enough equipment, enough men to dig everybody out of their driveways.
Do you hire any private companies, individuals to help out if you get behind?
Last year, the first time to my knowledge, and I'd have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure we got some people to help us, particularly on Main Street. And
well, no, there at one time you were having to load, you got the snow moved, got people where they can get around, but then you had to do something with the snow, and I guess you all were loading dump trucks and things, and cause otherwise the snow would have been there in March, April, May, June, probably.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You get the street clean, but you've got 12 feet of snow in front of Hennings. And so after we get the snow pushed, we got to come back and haul it away, and we haul it up to the city barn in that big field back there, and we dump it and move on.
Last week you sent out a news release, Facebook post, and glad you sent a news release. I try to tell my friends in Bardstown, maybe not everybody's on Facebook, and some other people may want other ways to get to it, to get some information. The city obviously in 2015 had its bicentennial with some great events, and obviously some things came up that maybe you had to investigate and talk about. You want to talk about that for a minute or so, if you would?
I will tell. We released that to the media first. I know you weren't on there because I didn't know what your current email address was, but I think we rectified that. I tell you, Dennis, as you well know me, I've always been slow to react to information that is not necessarily factual. And the reason I responded publicly, which nobody ever sees me post anything on Facebook, because I'd be on there all day long responding to the response of the post I made. But there was a couple of comments, maybe more, I don't know, I've never even read them, with regard to the gala, the bicentennial celebration. And there were some individuals' name mentioned, or one in particular, and then the city's name, whether it meant the city in a general sense or whether it meant city administration. Neither one matters to me. When it says City of Lebanon, I have to take that seriously. And I was surprised. The comments that were made on Facebook indicated that something was said in a bicentennial committee meeting that was racist. And I was completely surprised and taken off guard about it. And so I began the process of trying to find out, well, number one, did anybody say anything that I didn't hear? Did anybody hear anything? Was anything said? Was there any indication of anything said? And as usual, I turned to the city attorney so that when I talk about these things, I can look at the public and say, look, this isn't Gary Crenshaw saying this. This isn't Gary Crenshaw's investigation. This is a legal entity that has a oath to uphold the law and to do things right. And anybody knows Candace Ingle Gray, and I'm going to say this because I love her to death and she does a great job, but sometimes I get frustrated because she is such a stickler for the law, and sometimes what I think is the law and what she tells me it actually is, I'm wrong, okay?
Lawyers are always right, though. Just like wives, okay?
I'm glad you said that. But anyway, I take those things very seriously. As maybe not a lot of people know, I am married to a lady of color, and I can't imagine anybody saying anything to me with regard to race and a negative issue that I wouldn't vehemently and strongly take issue with it. I have a daughter-in-law who is of mixed race. That means my 2.5-year-old grandchild, whom I adore and love, years ago would have been classified as of a racial ethnicity, and we don't do that anymore. So I take those things very seriously as a mayor, and I take them very seriously personally. And according to Miss Ingle Gray, and according to what I remember, and all other 9 members of that committee, there was not any racial epithet used. And I can't imagine, again, anybody saying it without somebody taking issue with it, if not me. So I asked for some advice from several people. And when I found out it was being talked about in Springfield, when I found out it was being talked about not only on Facebook, but at the NAACP meeting, I recognized that as mayor of the community, I needed to make a statement, and that's what I did.
Obviously, a lot of work from a lot of people went into putting on the events in 2015.
Right.
And I guess hindsight's always 20/20. But after the accusation of a comment being made, and as you look maybe as the makeup, and again, hindsight being 20/20, would you have maybe altered the makeup of your committee somewhat to be a little more inclusive to those? But then, and I know that's easy to ask right now.
I don't know that because and I selected the committee.
And you had good people who worked hard and put a lot of time and effort into it.
I was very focused on not, the committee was made up of 7 Caucasian females and 3 Caucasian males. Dennis, we, after years, were instrumental in reestablishing the Human Rights Committee. I appointed first black police chief of this community. One of the requirements of every hiring that we do here at City Hall is how inclusive are we? There are certain things that get in the way of us hiring. For instance, I'll tell you, we would love to have more females and people of color on the police force. And we've made an effort. But generally speaking, people that qualify for those are being taken in Bowling Green and Lexington and Louisville, and we can't compete with that. I'm proud that the city has seen fit to appoint any number of people to committees and boards. So when you ask me that, looking in hindsight, I probably should have done that, but here's the thing about it. If I'd have done it, I'd have been doing it because I picked the people who I knew personally that could take off work at lunch every day and who would be here and had some connection. For instance, Miss O'Daniel, how many years has she been the coordinator for the chamber ham days? Melissa Knight is on the chamber board, and how many on marketing? Greg Ribbons is the tourism director. Chamber director. Stacy Mattingly was the former chamber director. Miss Olivier is the tourism director. John Thomas, city administrator, for coordinating all these things. Miss Pickerel is an advertising consultant. So individually, I can justify why everybody was there. And frankly, since the comments weren't made, and if the comments had never been reported as being made, there would have never been any question about the makeup of the committee. So, you know, it reinforces me that I need to even reach out further and be more inclusive. But on this issue, I'm satisfied that we did the best job we could, and I'll be very honest with you. It's not, you know, I reached out. I talked to the Knights of Peter Claver. I mentioned it to one of the ladies, and she said, you know, we're going to have our dance. It's traditional. We've been having it for a long time, so I didn't pursue that. I talked to one of the deacons of our local church and of a local black church here, and asked him if there were any way he could get some people to come, and I mentioned people that had other things. One of our city councilmen, I talked to him about coming. Would have loved to come, but he'd already committed to babysit, which is what most of
people
us
our age do.
And you know, frankly, if it hadn't been for this event, I would have been. Well, I don't know. I'm married now, but normally I'd be home on New Year's Eve because I don't go to stuff like that. It wears me out. And so, anyway, after all is said and done, it was an unfortunate thing. Nobody has ever come and told me who said anything, and I don't know how you deal with something like that other than to say it did not happen. And there was a comment made about, well, they didn't deny this, so that means they're guilty. Well, the reason somebody didn't say something may have been that they were asked not to. Yeah. And then somebody made a comment, well, the city made a statement, so there must be something to it. No, the statement was in response to all the gossip.
Okay.
Now, I don't do topics, and I don't do Facebook, and I'm not going to. But when something gets that widespread, and maybe somebody heard something and didn't hear it right, maybe they thought they heard something, maybe somebody made it up. I have no idea, but I can assure you of one thing. They didn't say it in front of me.
Yeah,
and they didn't say it in front of this committee.
And I've been around you a lot of years and have worked on some sensitive issues like that, you know, with you in the past. So I guess we're out of time. Pleasure's always mine to be in your company. I want you to know that.
Thank you. Come by anytime. We're open door down here.
Pretty much, I guess, the first Monday after every Tuesday, doors are open, right?
As long as you remind me.
Okay. Channel 6 TV Community Focus, I'm Dennis George.